Here we go.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Prep Life Podcast. This is your founder and CEO of Glam Girl Bikini, Amy Enger. And today I'm joined by my fabulous co host, Leemarie Hossetter. Hey, Lee.
Hi,
How's it going?
going great. Sporting my new first form shirt. Shout
Love
out
it.
everyone.
That looks very cool. I like it. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about just weight fluctuations. We were talking offline a little bit about how, this is a very common client with ourselves included. We
Mhm.
both have gone through this enough that we've seen the weight fluctuations, gotten frustrated, have had to have people talk us off ledges. I know myself included for sure. And sometimes you just need to step back, think about the situation, and there's usually some sort of cause. Like if you're following your plan,
Mhm.
all things included, you have to be following the plan. And you're, being accountable, checking in every week. There's some reasons, and we kind of came up with a long list of different ones, which I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with. But we wanted to kind of dive into those causes of scale fluctuations. Um, I wanted us, for our YouTube listeners, to see what an actual pound of fat versus a pound of muscle is. But um, it's so much more volume in a pound of fat versus a pound of muscle. It's so much smaller.
Okay.
And
It's
when
not okay.
clients,
So if you're watching on YouTube, this is not going to be accurate, but it would be
yeah,
like a pound of fat versus like a pound of muscle right
yeah,
here.
she's got like a big
Book
plant
and a plant.
and then a
Like
book.
both of these weigh about the same in my hand, but the amount of space they take up is like very different. One is much more lean, the other one's just big and fluffy and all over the place, but same amount of
Yes.
scale weight.
So there's a couple of things that happen when you're, recomping or you're dieting and cut phase. When you're losing body fat, you're losing volume. So first thing people will probably notice is that their clothes fit them better. If you're taking consistent measurements for your coach, which our clients do, you're going to see your inches go down, but you may not see the scale change, especially if you're swapping them out at the same rate. So your weight training, your resistance training, you're eating enough protein to support muscle growth. So you gain a pound of muscle, you lose a pound of fat, nothing shows up on the scale. And as you know, unfortunately, as females, I think that we're more fixated on what that number really means to us. It's just been ingrained in our head that you have to weigh a certain amount and da da da. But really, when you're gaining muscle, especially if you're gaining muscle at a more rapid rate, your scale weight might actually go up, but your inches go way down because that fat volume that you're losing is shrinking. So, I mean, this person probably knows who they are. I'm obviously not going to mention names for privacy reasons, but I had a client that her weight actually went up a pound, and she's really trying to get more toned and more like, cut and more muscle, growing more muscle. And her inches in all of her spots, like her waist, her hips, and her thigh all went down, and she lost like an inch and a quarter off her entire body, but her weight went up. So it was like we have a rating scale, and she gave herself like a 5, which is just average, in my opinion, out of 10. And really, like, that's pretty good because, especially if you're just wanting to get more tone, not necessarily, you know,
That's great. That's literally proof that she is putting on muscle.
yeah, yeah,
It's amazing.
exactly.
Amazing. This is why
Yes.
you have a good coach to talk you off ledges.
All right. So let's get into these different reasons why you might get weight gain, even if you're doing all the right things.
Mhm.
I feel like that should be the title of this.
Mhm.
Why, when I'm doing all the right things, is the scale going up?
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Do you want to start with the first one?
Sure. Okay. So acute inflammation during training. So when you are training hard, you're actually breaking down your muscle fibers. You're not building muscle in the gym. You are getting stronger, pushing more weights, but you're actually tearing your muscles down. And what happens is there is some inflammation that happens with that. So let's say you just had a really hard leg day, especially because when you're training legs, you are kind of using full body. If you're doing barbell stuff or even dumbbell stuff and you're going really heavy, let's say you have some inflammation or some lactic acid buildup in your muscles, that could actually show up on the scale the next day. That will go away because your muscles, as they're really building in the recovery time, so that would be like a temporary spike on the scale, could be because you went really extra hard on your workout.
Yeah, your body has to repair things. And I I have like a couple of clients in particular that their body just kind of responds, and like that inflammation is their immediate response. So if we have a hard leg day on their schedule, I always suggest that their check-in day is away from that. So like maybe after a rest day or something like that, because I've seen it go up by like 3 to 5 pounds. It's crazy how much
Yeah.
water just from those like tears, those micro tears and the muscle fiber as it repairs them. Yeah, it helps, it makes you retain water. So another obvious one I think for most people is salt, and especially if you're one of those people that isn't consistent about your sodium intake.
Mhm.
So if you're one of those people that is a Mrs. Dash, like you think salt's the enemy, which trust me, it is not. It is, you need electrolytes for your body to function, for your heart to beat, and for your just all over everything. People that don't do salt, it's crazy to me. But anyway, you have a hormone called aldosterone, and that is kind of like your kidney protector regulator, where if aren't salting very much and then you salt a lot, your body's going to hang on to that because it's like, oh my gosh, I need this. Like, I'm going to hang on to this. So I'm going to hang on to water as well. So that aldosterone hormone, depending on how it fluctuates, when it gets high, you're going to retain a lot more water because, your sodium is inconsistent. So that's why during peak week, we keep our sodium consistent and things like that. So aldosterone isn't spiking.
So the next one is dietary fiber. And I just want to reference back to what you said at the very beginning about if you are sticking to the plan, if you were on plan,
Yes.
because I know some of us stick to a meal plan and some of us do macros. So if you are one of those people that does macros and you don't have a fiber goal, you need to have a consistent fiber goal, but also there's a difference in your fiber. So I could do something like eat a Quest bar and hit my fiber goal. But a Quest bar is going to be fast digesting. It's just super high fiber. That's going to be different from me eating a huge salad with broccoli and cauliflower and all of those things, a bunch of lettuce, and hitting that kind of fiber. And that's going to be like bulk in my stomach and take a longer time to digest. So even if you are with a coach or you prefer to do your own macros, try to be as consistent as possible with food choices and the way that you hit those fiber goals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and your intestines are going to pull water into your intestines in order to like process the fiber. Those bacteria, that's their favorite food. They like the fruits and vegetables, like that's what they eat. So you're going to get gases and things like that they're going to release, especially if you're, binging on some Brussels sprouts or whatnot.
Only
Um,
competitors understand that.
yeah, I
Like,
know.
yes,
That
we've
sounds like
been
the
there.
craziest
We've been
thing.
there. I ate 2 bags of shredded lettuce one time, and they were not the little bags.
And
Bad.
there's also a difference between soluble and insoluble fiber because one creates the bulk in your stools and then one's a scrub brush. So that also, it treats your water balance differently in terms of like how to digest it, like how much effort your digestive tract is going to have to, how much water is going to get pulled into the intestines and things like that. So it's very easy to get bloated and things like that. Or um, I'm going to kind of skip ahead because this one kind of goes with that one. Bowel movements are another huge thing that can really make a difference in the scale weight. And I mean, TMI, but there's, after a good bowel movement, you could weigh 3 pounds less. If you're constipated, you could be up by 5 pounds. So it does really make a difference in terms of like if you're going to the bathroom every day as well.
Yeah. And that's why, like, going back to the dietary fiber, and I think this applies to salt too, but like just because those things might cause your digestion to slow down a little bit or it might cause the scale to spike doesn't mean they're bad. We need
Right.
the fiber because we need, if you go too low in fiber trying to get that scale down, you could run into some constipation issues. And then that's going to be just a whole nother level of trying to figure that out. So you
Yeah.
need that fiber. It's just staying consistent and being aware that if you do have like a fluctuation up in your fiber, you might see the scale go up. It's fine. It'll come back down.
Yeah, fiber is your friend. It
Yeah.
will make you satiated. It will slow down digestion, so that feel full longer. But yes, it could be a variable. So try to keep that number consistent. Same with the sodium, and the sodium. I didn't mention this, but like for example, let's say you go to a hibachi or something like that where they use a lot of soy sauce. It could be similar foods to what you normally eat on your prep diet, like chicken and rice and things like that. But the content in like the soy sauce, if you don't, have a lot of soy sauce and you then add that in, think about the fact that refeed meals might contribute. So that brings us to our next one with glycogen and carbohydrates. For every 3 to 4 grams, for every gram of carbohydrates, 3 to 4 grams of water is going to be held and stored. So if you are on a carb cycle, you've been on low carb for 3 days and then you have a big bump in carbs. The next day you might weigh more because you might be retaining more water because of those carbs. Um, it's not a bad thing. Carbs help us recover, they help us repair, they give us energy, they repair our muscles, but you just have to keep in mind that if there is something that was, maybe it's part of your plan, like you have a refeed, but it's a big spike in carbs, just probably don't weigh yourself until a couple of days later if that's going to mess with your head mentally, because
Mhm.
your weight's probably going to be temporarily up and then it'll probably go to a new low if
Mhm.
things are done right and
Exactly. And that
correctly.
that plays back into too, if you are tracking your macros or if you are following a meal plan with a refeed, if you all of a sudden get excited because you have enough calories to go out to eat, do not underestimate the calories in restaurants and the added fats and the added soy sauces and the things that if you don't see your food being prepared, you don't always know what's in it. So communicate with your coach about that, find out, hey, can I go out to eat with this refeed? How does that work? And just kind of be aware with that as well, because when you're in prep, everything counts. So your
Yep.
refeed should be structured as well. And so the next one is muscle gain. This is my favorite one. So if you are gaining weight or your weight is staying the same, but your measurements are dropping, that's a super good indication that you are putting on muscle. Also, if your weights are going up in the gym or your sets reps are going up in the gym, that's a good indication as well. Obviously, you can see it too, but sometimes we can't see it right away. So those measurements are a great tool to know if you're putting on muscle. And that is the point. We are bodybuilding. We're not
Yes.
competing to see who can diet the longest. We're competing to see who can build their body into the shape that fits their category the best. So,
Love
yay.
that. Yes. And another good thing too is just, and this one's not even on our list, but it just reminded me of it, is just maybe not use the scale as your own only indicator of success. I mean, first of all, pictures and inches obviously are great, but also get your body fat composition and your lean muscle tissue. That way, maybe you don't have to play so many tricks with your head and maybe once a month get an in-body scan or every 6 months get a DEXA scan, but kind of know your numbers in that way, have different measuring tools. And that kind of brings us to the inconsistent measurement tool or time of day. So depending on what time of day it is, it can really depend on like how dehydrated you are and how many times you've gone to the bathroom, like you've peed. So if you weigh yourself at 4 in the morning versus like 10 a.m. after you've slept in, it can make a big difference in your weight for sure.
Yes, I'm a classic 4 a.m. checking in there. When you're
But you
also
do weigh
working
yourself on the weekend, so you
yeah,
know like what your true weight is.
yeah.
And it's a lot different, right?
It
Like three
really
pounds
makes a
different.
difference. Yeah, yeah, a lot. Um, Also with the inconsistent measurement tool, really try and measure your waist, hips, and thighs at the same spot because you move
Yes.
that measurement up or down and it can change everything. So if there's anywhere like if you have a little freckle or a little like anywhere that you can like mark, this is where I do it every time, or if it's like an inch above your belly button or wherever it is at, try and be super consistent with your measuring tools and the
Yes.
places you take your measurements to.
And be aware once you start. So, one of the reasons why I put this down on the list here too is always use the same scale. I think both you and I have that travel scale that it comes with me everywhere.
Yep.
I travel a lot for my job and everything. So I'm on the road. I need a small, tiny scale. I think it's called NY something. I don't know.
Everyone's kind
Maybe we
of
can link the
got
brand.
the
We
Go
don't
ahead.
have an Amazon store or anything, so we're not getting kickback for this, but it's a great
Not an
scale.
ad.
It has like a little
Case.
basically
You can put it.
pouch
Yep.
that can
Right.
protect it. But I always use the same scale because if you use a different scale, it can be off by 5 pounds at least. It can be plus or minus. So you could get really excited that you lost a lot of weight and then you go on your normal scale that you have in your bathroom and then it says like you're heavier or you're lighter. So keep it consistent with the time of day as well, but also with the tape measure, make sure that it's not getting too stretched out
Mhm.
and you know depending on how tight you pull it can also make a difference too, so just be consistent with how you're doing it so you're really measuring apples to apples.
Love it. Okay. So next one is my favorite, hormones. Throughout the month, be aware of where your weight is going to go and why. So
Yes.
maybe track your cycle. If you get a cycle, track it. My weight will fluctuate 5 to 7 pounds just from holding on to water, just from being bloated. You can literally see, I wouldn't even have to tell Amy when my check-in is and I'm on my period. She can see it. But usually that's like the few days leading up to it. Once it
Yep.
hits, then that drops. So to just be aware, hey, this is my period week. And also make sure that you're staying consistent with your hormones, that you're not actually overeating. If you're one of those people that gets like really hungry the week before,
Yeah.
we say hormones, we're talking just what naturally happens. You want to stay consistent with your food, with your diet, with your everything on prep. And you might have to just white knuckle it through those certain weeks, but be aware of that and be aware that your hormones drastically affect the scale.
Yeah, and I even think that ovulation, so I don't know which tracker you use, but I use P tracker and it gives me like a little flower on the day that I'm supposed to be ovulating. And then it kind of calculates that. But I've noticed too that some competitors, like when they are ovulating or the couple of days leading up to the ovulation before the release of the egg, they'll notice constipation and that will make their weight go up, or they'll just notice that their scale weight goes up just because of the change of progesterone and estrogen and then the spike that day of the testosterone. So speaking of that, if you are on HRT, hormones such as like hormone replacement therapy, if you're on testosterone, that can make you really retain a lot of water. Different supplements, also. So just something to keep in mind. Obviously, that's more like a doctor's call in terms of like whether or not that's appropriate for you, but it is something to be aware of that scale will change if those hormones are different as well. Um, as far as supplements, so some supplements that I've noticed that are legal, let's say, without a doctor's prescription, like creatine, I've noticed because it does pull water and stores water in the muscle, which isn't a bad thing. It's great for growth, but some people react a little bit more, like they'll hold a little bit more water when they go on creatine. And I've seen it in competitors where like their weight will spike. And then I'm like, that's why we have that supplement, like what supplements you're currently on. And then I'll see, oh, last week I added creatine. Well, that's probably from that,
Yeah.
if all of these other things on our list have not been answered, which we ask all of those in our check-in because we have a section on digestion, we have a section on fiber, we have a section on what things were off track, like all these different things so that we're best prepared. Like if there is a fluctuation, we understand as coaches that there are so many variables, and we want you to report like every detail of the week of these things so that we can kind of put the puzzle pieces together. If that makes sense. But I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
I do. On creatine, I think a big thing, a big worry with people with creatine and retaining water is that when we think about retaining water, we often think about being bloated in our abs or like retaining like swollen ankles or things like that when you're on airplanes or things like that. And we don't think about
Right.
actually the goal of creatine, what it does is it pulls water into your muscles. That's a good thing. That's
Yeah.
why we take it. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing, just like when we talked in the beginning about inflammation during training. Like things, these words that we automatically think as negative are not necessarily negative always. And so, like all of these factors, we're not saying any of them are bad or that you should avoid them. We're just saying be aware of them and the reasons why the scale might be fluctuating for you.
Yeah. Because if you're anything like me, when I'm doing everything right, and like I'm checking in every week and I'm checking all the boxes and I see the scale just going up and my inch is not changing and things like that. Like sometimes I get in my head and then I have to think about like this list, okay, what factors might be playing a role in this? And I know for me, like a big one is sleep, and just I know we kind of mentioned that, and also stress. Those are both two that can really make me change in the scale. Like if I'm not as stressed, I won't hold as much water. I won't look as watery physically too. And then you mentioned the plane, which I think is another good one that we didn't have on our list. Travel can really throw things off. And most of the time it's one of two things, I think, is it's your bowel movement. So usually like vegetables and things aren't very readily available when you're traveling. So fibers off and digestion gets off, or you're dehydrated because when you're up in the air, that altitude will dehydrate you, like if you're flying. And sometimes people drop weight because of that dehydration, but then some people will, um, get constipated because they are dehydrated. So some other factors too, just to
Absolutely. Or
throw
even,
those out.
yeah, holding on to water because your body is just trying to retain as
Stress
much as
or
possible. If you're dehydrated, not drinking enough water,
yeah,
that,
or if you're not getting good sleep in the hotel room or things like
yeah.
that. These are
Well,
all
also,
factors and
I
they're
think
intertwined.
sleep affects your activity as well. So
Mhm.
if we're just constantly sleep deprived, but we're eating the same amount of foods, we're doing the same time of cardio, but instead of moving around a lot, if you're not tracking your steps, or if you're just kind of sitting on the couch like this versus like actually expending energy all the time, you might burn less calories in a week just because of your sleep. And that would be like an indirect effect of being like of lack of sleep too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think I covered most of the ones that I can think of that I've seen where there's big scale fluctuations. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's always come back to there's always a reason. So be honest with yourself if you weren't unplanned, but if you were unplanned, kind of make a mental checklist of all these things that we listed and kind of go through and figure out the reason, and don't let it, cause you to spiral or anything like that. Stick to the plan. Sometimes you just plateau and you just need to keep grinding. And if you're doing everything right, you'll see progress eventually.
Yes, yes. Just stick with it. Trust that you are doing the right things. And, if that is consistently that you're not changing, and you've looked through this list and they're not there, then I'm sure, like, as long as you have a good coach, they'll make the appropriate adjustments so that there are changes still happening. So, with that, I think we will sign off. If you would like to find us on Instagram, you can go to at Prep Life Podcast or at Glam Girl Bikini. And if you would like to apply for coaching with either Leemarie or myself, you can go to glamgirlbikini.com and hit the get started button. Thanks for listening, guys.